Yeah, we're live. 7:09. Hopefully everybody's doing well. I don't think I didn't make it on last night, and I'm already kind of fuzzy and out of focus here. There we go. Tonight I want to talk about superchargers, and one of the questions I get, and I get it here a lot actually, whenever we talk about superchargers, and this is a good question, and it's it's an honest, logical kind of thing that we would want to know about. And so the question is, hey, what happens if we take a smaller blower and spin it faster, and we compare it to a bigger blower that we spin slower? And the metric is like the comparison metric for this is boost. So we have a whatever kind of test motor that we have, and then we have two different size superchargers, and then we want them to make the same boost. And so obviously a bigger blower on any given motor, it's going to provide more airflow per revolution. So that's going to provide more boost. So we need to spin it. Let's say we want to make 10 pounds on both of them. So we spin the big blower slow enough so it makes 10 pounds. And then we spin the little blower fast enough so it also makes 10 pounds. And so here's the thing. The question is, where does it make 10 pounds at? Like if we have a centrifugal blower, we have two different size centrifugal blowers, let's say, and they rise up, we know that on a centrifugal blower, we're going to make less boost down low, and we're going to make more at the top. So the 10 pounds is definitely going to happen at whatever at or near the maximum engine speed that we're running at. So that we know that that's going to happen. So that we clock them basically or size them relative to the output of the naturally aspirated motor to make 10 pounds at the top on a centrifugal blower. A Roots blower is a little different. One of there are a couple of scenarios here that can happen. One is that, and this is the case of the blower comparison that we're going to talk about. We've done this many times, and this I'm going to talk about one that I didn't do that I just read about, which was kind of cool. It goes way back. But you have a scenario where both the little blower and the big blower can support the given power level that would happen at whatever boost level we're testing it at. Like both of them can make that boost on the motor that we're testing it on. That's very important, because if they don't do that and one of them runs out of steam, then one of them could make boost, at 1 RPM, and the other one could only make that amount of boost at a lower RPM, and it would fall off. That happens. And so sometimes when we do these comparisons, and this is something that I ran into when I was doing the comparison where we ran the Roots blower, a twin screw blower, a centrifugal blower, and turbos on 3 different combinations. That's what happens there. Particularly with a factory Eaton supercharger that was on the 03 Cobra, it can't continue to support at least the power level that we were testing it at, particularly at the higher boost level, because we ran at 7 pounds and we also ran at 10 pounds. At 10 pounds, it basically just couldn't keep up. Like we were asking it to do more. I think we were running into a little bit of belt slippage, which is another issue with blowers too. But it just was not nearly sized to be a really good. I mean, we did it. We chose that because that's what was the factory blower. We kind of wanted to compare the factory blower to other things. But in truth, the 122 or something else on a Roots blower size would have been better for the kind of power level that we were doing. So it's very important when we're choosing the metric like boost, when we're choosing boost as that metric, and this is how we're going to compare them. We're going to compare them both at 10 pounds. We have to make sure that they both make 10 pounds. And then we'd also sometimes have to choose, well, what if one of them makes 10 pounds at 5,500 RPM and the other one doesn't make 10 pounds until 6,000 RPM? Is that a fair comparison? One was going to make less than 55, one's going to make more. What is going on there? You have to, and that's a whole discussion that we could have about whether or not it's accurate. Is it accurate? Yes, because that's what they're doing. So we would have to look at that. We could choose different blowers for that and all of that. The couple of times when we've done this, I did this with the guys from Kenny Bell, or more accurately, the guys from Kenny Bell did it, and I was there while they did it. But this one was from the one I want to talk about tonight. By the way, the Kenny Bell thing, the same thing. So this is from an old B&M supercharger deal that I found. This goes back a long ways to 2004 or something like that. I'm trying to see when this thing was. See if they talk about when this thing was published. This publication is copyrighted by B&M Automotive Products, 1987. I don't know if that's B&M started in 1987 or this catalog was done then. At any rate, it was a while ago. The cool thing is it's got testing by David Vizard in it, which is good, but also by other guys. And they used Keith Black and Dick Landy and lots of cool stuff. And they have a bunch of testing that they did in this. And they tested the way that they did it the way that I like to do things, like testing like individual things. So we had our test motor. In their case, they picked a 7.5 to 1 small block Chevy, an iron headed deal. Again, I could go through this and talk about all of these fun things because there's a lot of cool stuff here, things that I would change and things I wouldn't, and like all the awesomeness and stuff. But it's all dyno related stuff with dyno curves of different changes that they made. So it's like definitely my jams. But they picked a 7.5 to 1 small block Chevy and then ran naturally a bunch of their blower stuff. And then they did it with different heads that they tried. They had their own camshafts that they tried, stock cams, and then a street cam, the super street cam, and they tried different blowers and probably headers and all kinds. And they did Ford and Chevy and Dodge and big block and small block and all kinds of stuff. So they did a ton of stuff here. One of the tests that they did, and the thing that we're going to talk about tonight, because the question is, and we've gotten that here, and I've gotten that from the various videos and stuff that we've posted on there. People make comments on it. What happens if we run a smaller blower and spin it faster, and we run a bigger blower and spin it slower, and that they both make the same boost? What happens? Well, the interesting thing is less about what happens at the peak, but let's talk about that first. So if they both make, let's say that, like in this case, they ran this 7.5 to 1 small block Chevy motor. And when they did this test, they did a B&M 162 blower. And they had a big Holley carburetor on at 1050. And the drive ratio was 2.38 to 1. So they were spinning it fast, that size blower on this motor they ended up making about 12 pounds with this thing. They also were testing a number of other 671 blowers, which would be considerably bigger than this 162. And so they spun those a lot slower, like 0.84 to 1. So not even 1 to 1 on this small block Chevy to produce the same amount of boost, to produce around 12 pounds, at least at the power peak. This was at 62 or 300 RPM. So they had 671s on a lot of these. And those 671s each had 2 Holley carburetors on there. So they had a 1050 single, because that blower that they had for B&M was a small one. And so it had a single carburetor opening. So they ran a big carburetor on it, and then they ran dual carburetors on the others. I don't think carburation was limiting these kind of power levels, because we're talking about, 480 horsepower or something. It's not making very much power. So more than enough carburation. So that wasn't the issue. But the thing that they did do was they provide the horsepower curve, the torque curve, and the boost curves, which give good information, because both of these were making, like I said, very, very close to the same peak pressure, which is what they were, I think, trying to do on this test. And so they wanted to see, they ran a Wine and a BDS and a Hampton 671. I think they were trying to compare those to see if there's differences between those designs, but then also to see how it compared to their smaller blower when that blower was spun up. What happens? Well, the thing happened that you would think happened, and that's that in absolute terms, if we're talking about the end of the power peak, like the horsepower peak, a bigger blower making the same amount of boost is going to be more efficient than a smaller blower, particularly a roots blower. And so it's going to make more power. And that's exactly what happened. The bigger blowers made more power on the top. But what happened, and by a fair amount to 30 or, I'd say 30 horsepower or so, it looks like. Yeah, 30, 35 horsepower, I think, at the top. That for me is to be expected. A bigger blower can make more power, and even at a comparable boost level, it's going to be making more power. It doesn't take as much parasitic loss to spin. One thing I would have liked to have seen would be the charge temperatures at these respective boost levels for these kinds of blowers. The 162 blower fairly small for running this kind of boost on this motor. I mean, they could have done some stuff to the test motor, but it is what it is, and it did what it did. The interesting thing and the discussion to be had for this is that two things. At the peak, the bigger blower is better. That's exactly what happened with the Kenny Bell deal too. You're spinning it slower. It didn't take as much parasitic loss to drive it. It made more power even at roughly the same boost level as a small one did. What happens though with the small one compared to all of these 671s, because they all had a very similar kind of boost curve, what happened was the smaller blower below, let's call it 4,800 or so, below that, the smaller blower had a lot more response. It was spun up much more than the other ones were because they were going to make the boost at the top. So they had both less boost and, not surprisingly, because those go together, less horsepower and torque production in the range where they made less boost, which was down low, which is below 4,800 RPM. So the smaller blower spun up did better down low. And on a 7.5 to 1 small block Chevy, that would kind of be the important part of the equation here. And again, ultimately, like beyond that, you start to lose power on the smaller blower. So it's like picking a camshaft. Well, which one of those do you pick? Do you pick the 4,800 to 60, in this case 62 or 6,300, doesn't rev very high, or you pick all of the stuff down below that? There's always a trade-off. But in the case of like down around 3,000 RPM, to put it into perspective, the smaller blower spun up at more than twice the speed of the other blowers, was up by about 2 pounds of boost. And so it was up a decent amount of torque compared to the other blowers. Not probably as much as it could have been, only because, well, no, I guess that's just a different scale. So we're talking about, again, 30 or 40 foot-pounds of torque down there. So pretty good, a couple of pounds of boost. And so it was more responsive, more boost, more power down low. And that's what happens when you speed them up. When you speed the little blower up, it does well down low. But ultimately, you could get into a discussion about overspeeding because the blower gets less and less efficient at particularly a roots blower at these higher speeds. It gets more efficient from being really slow because you don't have as much bleed by it, but then it just gets inefficient. And so that's exactly what happened here. A 671, not even spun 1-to-1 on what is obviously a fairly mild small block Chevy, considering that it only made, even with these things making 12 pounds of boost, this thing was only making 480 horsepower. So it wasn't too, it's not too stellar of a motor to begin with, because with a 671 on there, that's an easy, that blower can easily do 600 horsepower. So they could have done, they could have made a lot more power had they spun the blower up. But the interesting thing is, for our discussion, the comparison between the small blower spun up and the big blower, not spun as fast. If you're trying to match the boost up, obviously, if we just sped the big blower up and matched the boost down low, then it would have had way more boost at the top. Another different kind of comparison. But we could have used the two runs to kind of see what happens down low. Okay, look, now they're matching at 3,000 RPM. Let's say, what happens there? Now they're matching at 4,000 or 5,000 or whatever. And you could do all of that testing, and that's all good stuff. And the nice thing about having a blower, and even with a carburetor, because the carburetor kind of matches all of that stuff with airflow, when we were doing blower testing on 671s and 871s, and we had the dual carburetors on there, we just changed the boost, and it worked. It worked really well. The carburetors self-adjusted. They're kind of like mechanical mass air meters, and they worked very, very well and changed the amount, the draw changes the amount of fuel that you're supplying. And once you get the ratio right, seems to be pretty good. And also, like we've talked about a lot of times, if the air fuel ratio on these supercharged motors, when we're testing them, is 11.3 or 11.5, there's just almost no change in power at all. So if it's in that range, it's all fine. But the smaller blower, more responsive down low, not surprising. The bigger blowers, better on top. But the question always, which one do you want? And which are you willing to make that trade? But this was cool. This has so much stuff in it. This has so much, like, so many, like, you can see the kind of, let's see if we can get that. Yeah. So you can see the kind of graphs that they got in there. So you got our boost curve down here. And this is our torque curve on a different scale. I like when the torque curves on the same scale so that it crosses 52, 52. And then you can see them. They're both big. But then these are all the horsepower deals for the different respective blowers. So again, this is how I spend my time. I was talking to Brian the other day and sent him a text and said, look, I'm even dreaming about like dyno testing. I had a dream where we tested the Brian and I were talking. I had a dream that we were talking and that we had run a test, or that he had run a test, or somebody had run a test on their new candid valve heads versus, because I sent them those 220 trick flow heads to compare those. And that I had a dream that it made like a lot more power or whatever. I'm like, yep, that's me. I'm even dreaming about dyno testing, even though that's what I do. So we'll see what you guys got going on. We're going to, because we're here doing it this way, we can do a poll. Okay, would you pick a smaller blower spun faster over a bigger blower spun slower for a street motor? And our poll is off and running. Scroll back here, see what you guys got doing. Chad, Jordan, Jet, what's going on? Rich Wood, twin blowers making 50 pounds. Yeah. Everyone spin the big blower really, really fast. Yeah. I'm curious to see. I don't remember if we took charge temperature readings when we were spinning when we made like 1,000 horsepower with that, or right near 1,000 horsepower with that 671. We were spinning it pretty fast, I think, but I don't remember if I took charge temperature measurements. The nice thing about those blowers is that even when you're spinning them up, that you have fuel going through it, so you get really, really good cooling and then really nice stuff if you run E85 carburetors. No back pressure on superchargers. What's the thing called with those paper things where they plug into the monitor? I know exactly. I like looking at that stuff. One of them is a little bit more beat up, and so the pages, it got wet, so the pages, or some of the stuff is pulling off of the other pages and stuff, but still good information. Stood right next to Pep Boy's nitro rail on the track while a stage and left the tires were walking idle because chassis twists. It set a world record that day. Bobby, Braden, what's going on? F57. Don't larger superchargers put out more CFM at the same boost output as a smaller supercharger? Well, the thing that we would have to tell you definitively yes or no that that's happening, I suspect from the power output that the answer is yes. I'd also like to see the charge temperature, but we would want to see if that's the case, and we would need an air hat to figure that out. I just wish we could all see the potential of the North Star engine. You want us all to be on board with you so that you don't feel lonely. 92 millimeter Phytech throttle body attached to a Raylar intake. Cam's a 203. 530. What injectors you recommend with an 0411 ECU? Yes, I'm not a mechanic. Well, I would get big enough injectors to support at least 500 horsepower. It's not going to make that much, I don't think, but I would have enough to do that. So like 50-pound injectors would be fine. We have some of those on the channel at richardoldnerperformance.com. We have some of the flex fuel injectors. I don't know if the length is right for the fuel rail on that stock manifold on that 8.1, but I'm going to take a look right now and see. Big block Chevy stroker. 8.1 cam test. Where were we at? Yeah, 450 or something like that. Let's see. Here's a cam and port intake. Oh no, we were above that with the cam and port intake. So we're at 483, and then 600 foot-pounds of torque, 597. Yeah, so you need enough for at least 500 horsepower, and those 50-pounders would be more than enough for that. Would a positive displacement supercharger have more effect we are seeing with bigger size not being spun at higher gear ratios? That this is the one that we're talking about here is a roots blower. The B&M blower is roots. The one, all of them are. The 162 is, and all of the 671s are roots blowers. I'm saying the LH2 version of the North Star engine. Currently running a 2.3 blower on my Coyote and love spinning it to death. Currently at injector limit, but I'll hopefully finish throwing moon boost at it soon. My guess is you can easily get to the flow limit of that supercharger with a Coyote if the Coyote has ring gap and head studs or whatever and it's prepped. The Coyote should be able to take a 2.3, should be take everything that a 2.3 blower can dish out, because they can normally run turbos that will go way beyond what a 2.3 blower will do. For street, I'll go with spinning the smaller blower fast with intercooler for the low end torque. None of these blowers had intercoolers other than what's inherent in having carburetors. And I would argue that, like, I wouldn't run these at 12 pounds. I would make the motor much better and then lower the boost a lot. And that's one thing that I liked about that particular catalog, is that they showed that when we put the ported heads on, the boost came down. We put the bigger camshafts in, the boost came down. And it did all of the things that it's supposed to do that we've gotten used to and see all the time. But running a blower on here at the same speed and having it produce more power and having the boost drop, that's just nothing but good. Particularly, I would argue, even more so on a roots blower, because they're just not that efficient. They start heating the air up at really high boost levels. I like the sounds of a blower whine. Alcohol injection for full throttle, hot tune stuff. 2.3 TVS power delivery is wild compared to Whipple 3-liter, which feels lazy down low. Depends on heat. A Whipple 3-liter should easily outpower a 2.3 TVS. Depends on heat. Stuff spinning faster tends to have higher heat, so if it can be lightweight, reliable, cool, and more affordable, then sure, a small blower spinning faster would be okay. Yeah, I wish I had charge temperature data, and I wish I had airflow data too. It'd be a little harder to get the airflow data from a dual carb thing. I don't think I've ever seen dual air hats on there, but it could be done. Jim, question: 470 Mercruiser engine for my Project 32 Roadster pickup, 6,200 RPM max, using 2 Holley 2300 carbs in line. How long should the intake runners be? Well, why did you pick that maximum RPM? What is limiting that? Interesting. I wonder if the larger pulley rotors is also a mechanical advantage, reducing the parasitic loss. I guess the energy required to squish air is the same either way. Good luck, Chevy's rule. Building a North Star is like riding a moped. It's okay until your friends find out. Having the great debate got my pros and cons list going between the Rebel LS ECU and the Holley Terminator for my turbo build. Just venting. All right. I don't think you go wrong with either one of those. I think that the Rebel is probably less money. Interesting to see an efficiency response testing between different types of positive blowers. Obviously, centrifugal is way different. Yeah, centrifugal is not. I mean, it does provide boost response in that it gives you the boost because it's mechanically coupled to the motor. So when you go to full throttle, you get some boost. You just don't get nearly as much as you do on a positive displacement deal because you're having a little tiny impeller that's not spinning fast enough yet to be really, really efficient, like where turbos are, versus big rotors, relatively speaking, that process a lot of air immediately. The downside is that they just don't. They have limitations in how fast they can spin and how efficient they are they're basically on a roots blower. You're just moving air from one side of the blower to the other. Eventually I will ditch my 2.3 for a turbo, whether it's a twin or single, I'm undecided. Car makes 1,000 wheel horsepower on 18 pounds, ring gap sleeved and ARP. You're making 1,000 wheel horsepower with a 2.3. That's a lot. How do you think an 871 would do on an LS 5.3? Alcohol Digger has one, and I've been eyeballing it for another project. I think it would do fine. I mean, we've run 671s on them. I've never run an 871, but it just has more potential. Heat buildup would be an amazing comparison for roots to screw or centrifugal, non-intercooled. Are you talking about charge temperature heat? I think that the centrifugal wins that in terms of charge temperature. And the way to do the test would be just to monitor it coming out of the blower before the intercooler. You should run an intercooler just so that you don't hurt the motor, because you're going to want to run high boost levels for something like that. And you just monitor it coming out of all the superchargers. You have a Silverado. Can you show us the fitment on your turbo or just the whole build? I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have a turbo on my Silverado is all stock. Mine is all stock. And on a turbo, I think you're going to see similar things. Obviously, a small turbo, much more responsive, going to be able to build boosts a lot earlier and stuff. And then ultimately, it can't support the power level of the bigger turbo stuff on the big end. Factory, the Mercury RPM limit is 5,200. Secondary imbalance, 224 cubic inches. Also not going to be a race car. What is a 4,700? Or is that what it was? Is that what you said? A 470 Road Cruiser. So what size, Jim? What size motor is that? I was thinking it was 470 inches, but that's not the case. Question: is an LSA blower roots or screw? It is a roots blower. We're hoping Jedi mind trick you into getting a turbo kit on your truck. Oh, we may test one on the truck. Also want to change the pistons. Thought I heard something before about not using LQ9 pistons with an LQ4, using a Trailblazer SS intake. Stock injector is big enough. Big enough for what? The stock injectors on a LQ4, probably even an LQ9, are not very big. So it depends on what kind of power you want. Can a 2013 Camaro SS stock fuel handle a 2650 magnets and supercharger? Yeah, the fuel rail and stuff can, but the injectors and the pump can't. I put my junk on 370 back on the 351. That should work good, right? That should be big enough. Oh, it's the half of the 460. Okay. I thought that was a 3700 though, and not a 4700. You gonna have any of the old LY6 motors for sale in the future? No, probably not. No, the dog doesn't need to go out. He's fine. They're just barking at stuff outside. They're guard dogs. They're looking out the window, barking at monsters, people. And will 560 BI springs work with your low buck truck cam? Yes, we have those for sale. They're $79, or you can use the factory LS3, LS6 springs. Loose 4 cylinders over 2 liters need a balance shaft so they don't saw themselves in half at a higher RPM. Response is very noticeable over the 78, 75. Given the testing that we just did, that doesn't surprise me. Now, I haven't tested that on 3-1, but we have tested a number of other ones, and the 78, 75 is not as responsive as the smaller ones. Are you going to get the rings on the Silverado? Not if we put the turbo kit on there, we're just going to mock it up and put it on and probably run it at low boost on the dyno with good gas in it. I'm not going to put ring gap in it. My guess is some of those rings are probably stuck. My fault if I stated a couple of years ago that your truck was boosted. No, we did try to put a supercharger on there, just on the chassis dyno, but it's all stock. Shane, what is it you want? A 4L80 just popped up for sale with a manual valve body. It says it was for a Jeep crawler. Is that something worth getting? Or are the gears so different being a crawler? My guess is they would have the gear thing geared way down. It might have 4 or 5 series gears in it if it's just a crawler. Is Richard being bullied into getting force induction for his truck? No. No, this is actually something that Jimmy and I were talking about. We had something in particular that we wanted to test and mock up on the truck so that we know that it will go on a vehicle. And then if we put it on there and, it's not going to be permanent, but we put it on there, we might as well make a pass on the chassis dyno at 7 pounds or whatever. Just say, hey, look, this is what it does. Have you ever used an 8-pin to 6-pin throttle body converter harness? I have not. We don't ever do that. Why do you want to shout out, Shane? So you just got one, basically? I don't understand that. And then that 7 becomes 9 and 10. It wouldn't with us. It would only be 7. I'm actually very good at that. It has a 4L60 trans in it, so it's not going to be, and it's going to be a 1-gear pull. I just want to see it make boost, and we really want to monitor the response because that's what I care about. We know what boost does. We know that if you add this much boost, it adds kind of power like this. So we know that would be the case. And I would run E85 in it just to make sure that it's safe and can't hurt itself. And then I just want to see if we get in the throttle with a stock converter and stuff, and then what happens. Do you think that the ZF6 is a good transmission for a Cleveland? Yes. Neighbor down the street was expecting your setup to boost creep. Do you have little turbo keychains? No, but we're talking about that. We're trying to figure out some of those little things to do. Had an old B&M 122 blower on a 302 Ford. Ran it so hard it would melt the cheap wiring cover to it. You must have really been speeding. I'd never heard of a 122. I've heard of the 144s and the 174s. I think 177s. And then 250s. We ran a couple of those. 6-liter turbo LS running a vent out of each valve cover into a catch can. Will it vent to atmosphere? Do I need to run a hose back to the intake? Terry, we don't like running oil vapor back into the motor, which is what you're doing when you run a PCV on it. So we would just run it into a catch can. Do you have any LSA tests on your videos? I don't. I've never run an LSA blower on anything. I've run plenty of roots blowers on stuff, but not an LSA. Would a turbo blower keychain work on RC car? No, but just a little bit of nitromethane probably would work. Although that's what you get for a lot of those RC cars anyways. That's what the fuel is. LQ4 build, 243 heads, easiest way to get 11 to 1 or so. Thought there was an issue using LQ9 pistons. An LQ9 piston with a 706 head is going to get you pretty close to 11 to 1. Might even be a little more than that. I'd have to go to Wallace Racing compression calculator and you can put all that stuff in. Because I think that an LQ9 with a 317 head is like 10-1. And so if you change a 317 head to a 243, you're going to get close. You could do a 243 head and then mill that, and then also put a 41 gasket on it. I'm sure that that would get you 11-1. I appreciate everything you've done over the years. Many of us rely on your shared expertise to keep the stock bottom ends in our LS motors intact under boost. Yes, ring gap, then ring gap. I consider the LSA an adapter for the 5.3 as a backup for the turbo kit. Seems prices are still up there. Yeah, I think that that would be great. Like, I like that idea of getting these takeoff LSA blowers. The problem is that they just take the blower off and then they put a TVS on there, or a Kenny Bell or a Whipple or whatever else that they're upgrading it to, because it's only a 1.9 liter blower. Now you can port them and you could do all that stuff too, but ultimately it's still that size blower. It may be a really good version of that size blower, but a really good version of a 2.6 or a 2.65 compared to a 1.9 is just going to be a lot better. So there are guys, as always, like we did with the M90, trying to get, let's get the maximum amount of power out of the M90 that we can. Okay, that's good, but it just becomes problematic after a while. And it's not something I recommend. We just did it as more of a gee whiz kind of thing. Same thing with the 1.9. A bigger one just works better. But they're not, my point was, Tim, but they're not cheap anymore. I mean, even when guys were taking them off, they weren't taking the whole setup off, which is what you need if you're trying to run that blower and obviously the drive assembly on a 5.3 instead of the motor that it came on. Anyone I know, anyhow, I know you don't self-promote, but can you do a video on your cams? I have videos up on my cams. We just did a video. I just posted a video because Jimmy and I did testing when he came out here, and we ran the 6-liter with a low buck truck camshaft and the Truck Plus camshaft, and we ran them both with truck manifolds and Trailblazer SS manifolds on a 6-liter. And then I've done lots of testing with the low buck truck camshaft on 5.3s, both with and without boost and stuff. So there's a lot of videos up on those. Are 823 heads any good on LQ4? Yes, they are. They make, that's the best factory head that you can put on there. The rec port, not particularly the 823, but 821, all of those. Is an L92 a good candidate for a cheap NA 500 wheel horsepower? Making 500 wheel horsepower is going to be difficult. It's going to be expensive. You're going to have a lot of stuff to get, because that's 600 flywheel basically. And so to get 600 flywheel, you have to do a lot of stuff to it. NA. Spinning smaller blowers faster creates more heat, and then computers pull timing and reduces the throttle body angle, but it sounds cooler. It doesn't reduce the throttle body angle if it's a manual throttle body like we ran. We don't run a drive-by-wire throttle body, and we don't allow it to pull timing. It's all the timing stays in it when we test it. Are you testing to see if you can run low boost without gapping rings? No, we know that you can run boost. The question is how much and for how long. We've run boost on like that. The 5.3 that I have has run boost many times now. We just got done running 8 turbos on it. It's never had ring gap put in it. But for how long? And you know, what guys do is, let's say it runs okay on 7 pounds. It's never going to stay there. They're always going to turn it up and up and up, and then they blow it up because it doesn't have ring gap in it. If you put ring gap in it, then you keep going up until something else happens that's not related to ring gap. Ring gap just takes away one of the potential problems. I pick up an LT1 from a buddy's 90 Camaro. I want to convert it to HEI and carb setup to keep the build cheap. GM performance parts intake manifold is money. Do you ever get your drilled intake to not leak oil? No, the drilled intake is, the problem with it is and it can be done, but it takes a good welder, and it also takes somebody with a mill so that you can get the distributor pad, the hole and the pad in the right spot, and also get it level. So it has to be in the right spot, you know, so that it lines up with the other hole down there. Then it also has to be in the right spot height wise, so that when you put the distributor in, it's not, and you bolt it down, it's not loading the oil pump and that it's not trying to pull out of the oil pump, so that it has that right distance. A slip collar on a distributor goes a long way to helping that. You have to have a pad on there, obviously, to bolt and hold the distributor down. And in my case, right now, that's all at an angle. And so when you try to bolt and hold the distributor down, we're not holding it down very much because it's got a rag wrapped around it and stuff. We're just kind of, corralling it. But if you put too much load on it, you're side loading the camshaft, and it's just not good. The leaking oil is the least of our problems. I don't care if it leaks oil on the dyno. A 177 Wyan on my 9-to-1 350, and it works awesome. Yep, we ran one of those on. I don't remember if it was ours, a 177 or 174. We ran one on a big block that I had, and it worked good. Drove it all over. What's one of the most boosts you've ever made in one of your videos? The highest boost I've ever run, I did it twice. One was on the last Big Bang motor. We ran like 29 to 30 pounds on that. And that's where we ran out of map sensor, basically. That's the one that did 1,540 horsepower. And then I also ran that much boost on a Honda B series, and that made 728, I think. My cousin mentioned he wants to get an S2000. What kind of mods would be good to do to an S2000 right off the bat to make it faster and fun? Boost on those is really good. Nitromethane works good for everything. That definitely helps make power. SHP Dart block or Iron Eagle for a Ford. I'm in California and my Gen 4 is still alive after spiking to 23 pounds. Last week on the 91 and a lot of water meth in my 67 Firebird. If I hadn't gapped them at 28 and 30, it probably wouldn't. Yeah, they're much less tolerant of those kinds of oopsie kinds of things. Dart bases their blocks on estimated horsepower goals. What are you doing? Hello, mister. Hello. What are you doing? What? Oh, you're a good boy, huh? I have to thank you for the information you gave us. We have had some great conversations around here about the motors you have from the small block Ford, the small block Chevy, or the Buick. Thanks again. M351 staying in the house. I have an M112 on a baby tunnel ram feeding a 3800. Really, you made your own tunnel ram for that? That's very cool. Dyno Tuner is nervous about running it without an intercooler. He's giving me a little 50-50 meth pre-blower about idea. No, I have videos up where we did it both before and after, and it works in both situations. I don't know how much boost you're trying to run, but I would run good fuel in it. Like I would run E85 in it, and then you should have fewer problems. S2000, get a K-Tech engine. Get a 4-piston engine. Would it be okay to put a Wine 177 on my 454? I know they're made for small block Chevys, but I've seen some slapped on factory 454s. Yeah, you can make good power with those. I have videos up on our 454 that we ran those on. They worked fine. Why do we get bored with our junk so quick? Just big problems and tons of wasted money. We had an Alice Chalmers tractor puller that ran a compound turbo set, 150 pounds. Yeah, that's one of the golden retrievers. We have 2 of them. In fact, I need to make sure he's not getting in trouble. What are you trying to do over there? Okay, all that's closed. Okay, you're good. I just want I need to make sure, and not like you haven't done that before, huh? Not like you haven't done that before, huh? Hello. 177 on 454 would be good, but sure to use 10 belt rib compressions, at least 9-to-1. Yeah, we drove ours all across the United. We used it as our tow vehicle for our trailer for our race car when we were running World Challenge. So it was a 454 with that blower on there. And then I ended up upgrading the motor because it definitely needed more power. The reason we put the blower on because it wasn't hitting on very good on all the holes. So we needed power to get over hills and stuff. So we just put a blower on it and it worked good. And then we did a kind of built motor. So I have videos up on us running the blower on different stuff at different boost levels and stuff. And different mods. My M112 is on a Holden lower intake, making 10 pounds, no 85 around here. Okay. Just came from another video of yours. That's what we like to see, and saw that you were live. So I'm coming over live. It's live. It's all the way live. Getting ready to build an 6-liter LS. Can I make 600 horsepower NA and still be daily drivable? 600 horsepower NA out of a 6.2 is going to be ported heads, a big cam. You might be able to get there with the, I don't know, with the LS3 intake manifold and a 92 millimeter throttle body. I'm thinking maybe like the performance design intake manifold would help you get there, but it's going to be a big cam. You have to have a big cam to make that kind of power. Getting an 871 so I can make some boost. K-Tech F20C can go 12,000 RPM with F1 rods. I do have access to E85. Did you put the 177 on a stock 454 or did you build it first? We put it on a very tired stock one, and then also on the modified one that I put a crane cam in, a very small crane, like a 203 crane cam. We had ported 049 heads. We originally ran it with an Edelbrock, like a Performer intake manifold, a tiny one, but then we upgraded it. Richard, I have questions. Why are some two-steps on cars extremely aggressive and some are quite mild? Is it all just in the tuner? Can anybody answer that? A two-step is not a universal thing. So the people that are tuning that and employing that, they're not all going to be the same. I can tell you that. I don't do two-steps for factory tunes and stuff, or even aftermarket tunes, because I've never run anything like that on the dyno, and I don't tune stuff for out on the street. But yeah, you could make that softer or harder. I have to fill 55-gallon drums because the nearest station with the 85 is 2 hours away. Really better than 75%, but that's all you need. It doesn't, whether it's 75 or 85, you're still good. I go to Nebraska. What if I run 12-to-1 compression on E85 for my 6.2? You can do that, and it will help make power, but your 6.2 probably is if it's a LS3, it's already fairly high compression. It's already near 11-to-1, right? If it's an L92, it might be lower than that. That will help, but that would make it less drivable. I picked up an L96 6-liter with 823 heads, sloppy stage 2 cam, one of my intercoolers, and a 2650 blower on E85. Hope to get 800. That should be, Tom, that should be a good combination. On it's going to like E85, obviously. And we know a 2650 will easily support that. An L9H. I built many engines using the 177 YN blower. What's the difference between an LS2 and an LQ4? Because I don't want to sound stupid telling people I have an LS2 and really have an LQ4. Well, they're dramatically different. One of them is a truck engine, an iron truck engine. The other one is an all aluminum car engine. And they differ in horsepower by about 100 horsepower. The LS2 has a different cam. It has different heads. It has more compression. It has a different intake manifold. A lot of the things are different about it. The only thing that they share really is displacement. I don't think spinning a small blower fast would be good for longevity for a street car, even if it gives better response. Bigger also means you have room to grow. When you put a big turbo on your dually, when it makes a lot of sounds, but does it kind of slow it down? I don't know what sounds you're talking about. I can tell you that Mike Davis, the guy that gave me that 6-liter, he has a turbo on his 3500 with an 8.1 in it and has 600,000+ miles on it. So it works, and he tows everything and drives all the time. So he probably doesn't drive it all the time because I don't know that I'd want to pay for gas on a turbo 8.1, but he's driven it enough to put more than 600 or 650,000 miles on it, which is good. How are we split here? Would you pick a smaller blower spun faster over a bigger blower spun slower for a street motor? 51% are picking the small blower and 49 are picking the big blower. That's basically half and half. I think in that instance, it would be hard not to like pick the, maybe hard to not to pick the bigger blower. Only because like we're talking about with the boost thing, that like with a turbo, 7 becomes 10 and then 20 or whatever. And I think you might see the same thing with the blower, because the blower is not, you can't do it like on the fly like you can with a turbo, but you just change the pulley, and especially if you're at the track or whatever, that's pretty easy. So what do LS2s come in, like GTOs? They did come in GTOs. They come in Camaros. They came in Corvettes. And then I think that they also came in Trailblazer SSs, I think. Uh, 471. Yeah, you can run a 471. I don't know if I've ever even seen one of those at West Tech. I think Freiberger has one of those. He either has a 471 or a 371. Not everyone wants to not see out there with a big supercharger. Yep. That is one of the benefits of having these, these underhood superchargers, as opposed to the giant thing sticking out of the hood. I don't know. I'd be curious to see how tolerant, police and stuff are for that kind of thing cruising down the road. I don't know if they would just, I don't know if they pull that over. Freiberg has a 371. I knew he had one of those. A friend of mine has a small blower on his 360 Mopar. It's tiny. Would you prefer a supercharger or turbo for a daily driven truck? It would depend on what I'm doing with the truck. And I don't think that there's a bad choice there. What we're trying to do and what we're looking at and the thing that we want to test is I want to have an easy to install turbo setup, like for a truck, that has the boost response that a positive displacement blower does. That's what we're looking at, because I think that that's important for people. I'm not interested in doing turbo kits and that kind of stuff. And I'm not interested in doing, 1,500 or 2,000 horsepower. I'm not interested in that stuff. But I am interested in a guy that, like, as soon as as he's rolling into the throttle and he wants to see boost. That's what I'm interested in, because I think that there's a lot of guys that will want that. My goal for the 6.2 is to build a 416 stroker with 12.5 to 1. But if I can't get reliable 600 horsepower NA, then I guess I'll have to build lower compression for boost. You can do the boosting, obviously, but I thought that you were talking about making a 6.2 liter, getting that to make 600 horsepower. A 416 is very easy then. That's not hard at all. It doesn't need to be 12 to 1. The 408 made 625, and that was probably 11 to 1. It had a pretty good sized camshaft in it, but it had a fast manifold and had good heads on research, 245 heads on it. But out of a 400 and like that was a 408 because it was a 6-liter, an iron 6-liter block. But out of a 415 or 416, 600 horsepower is not a problem at all. I'd love to see a comparison on the dyno between stock rockers versus rollers on an LS motor. I have the videos up. It's been up for a really, really long time. Valve train stability at high RPM and effect requirement on open spring pressure to stabilize the valve. Yeah, we didn't do it at very high RPM because we ran into valve float with stock springs almost immediately, like at 5,000 or 5,500 or whatever. That's what the video was about. It was really about a guy, okay, I want to put rockers on here instead of opening the motor up to put a camshaft in it. What are rockers worth? Well, they're worth a little bit of power because you have a combination that wants more cam timing. That's why we get such big gains from cam timing on LS motors, is because they have all the other things. So if you just put roller rockers on there, what happens? And it, change the ratio, and you can make more power. But you definitely need a spring upgrade with roller rockers on it. And roller rockers are not going to provide any more valve train stability. In fact, they probably would provide less, given how much RPM we've already run with stock stuff. So where the roller tip thing, because you already have a roller fulcrum on the factory one, where the roller tip comes into play is with very high lift stuff, because you're wiping the stock one, since it's a slider deal. You're wiping that, and then you can be side loading the valve. So if a guy's running a high lift cam, and particularly if he's doing it with bronze guides in the head, which I don't like, I like powder metal guides, they can wear the guides out. And so that's where they're recommending roller tip rockers. But you better have some spring rate. Runaway is pretty awesome with supercharger versus a turbo. Well, GT45 on LQ9 come in like that? No, a GT45 does not come on early at all. Not sure how I missed that video. I'll hunt for it. Yeah, just do a search for roller rockers. It comes up. Of your experience and knowledge, how much horsepower do you think a 454 board 30 with aluminum heads and a 177, 6 pounds would make ballpark range? I'm trying to make 600 flywheel. If you heard lifter noise on an LS when warmed up, what would you adjust and give more preload? You can try that, but I would want to see how much preload you have already. If you have a quarter of a turn, I would put more preload in it. If you have a turn or a turn and a half, I wouldn't put any more preload in it, because that's not the problem. It's not preload. Let's see. I can take a look and see where we got on the smaller blower. Big block Chevy supercharger. We made 578. That looks like it's at about 5 pounds. Yeah, 5.2 or something. And it made 638 foot-pounds of torque. And that was a 454, 9.8 to 1. So it had a 18 to 20 cc dome piston in it with valve reliefs, because we were running more camshaft. It had ported 049 heads, a 203, 212 cam, which is not anywhere near as big as you should have. It had Hooker Super Comp headers on it, and it had the 174 with a 2.24 drive. And like I said, 578 at 5,200, which tells you all that you need to know about the camshaft. And then let's see. And so that's 13 and a half. So that's less than 7. So 6.5 pounds with a slightly bigger blower, a 420, it made 640 and was still climbing at 5,600 and 686 foot-pounds of torque. GT40 will come in late and quit early on an LQ9. Something that longer adjuster gets ejected through. Our LSA motor is a 6.8 liter spinning a 1.9 Eaton with a 255 upper and 917 lower. That's like all of it. 720 wheel horsepower. If I had the money, I would get a 2650. Yeah, you'd see a dramatic change in power from a blower upgrade there. The problem is, just like when we were doing the M90 stuff, is you get to a point where, hey, we've got big gains. We added boost, and then it starts making less and less power, or less and less of a gain. And then you start, then it starts becoming like fighting with NA motors. Okay, we're only getting 5 horsepower here, or 10 horsepower here, or whatever. And you're like, yeah, this is not what we're used to seeing, because we've spun the blower way up, and it just doesn't have a whole bunch left to give. And so finding more means, okay, we got to look at make the NA. Hey, dogs, stop barking at stuff. You got to make the NA motor more powerful, and it's all that stuff. What if I use a Torque Tech with an Eaton 112 on a 4.6 2-valve. Yeah, you can. A positive displacement blower is good on there on a 2-valve. So our gain's very minimum. Putting roller rockers on a 93 Lightning with an ECAM on it, no matter the ratio. Do you have factory rockers on there now? I think you might gain some power going from a factory bolt down rocker to a roller rocker on a Ford. I thought we were talking about LS stuff. What would cause spark knock on a 5.3 only on really cold days until warmed up? It doesn't do it on warm days? That seems counterintuitive. Are you sure that it's hearing spark knock? It should knock less when it's cold. These JB Will to fix my cracked radiator. Cracked again. Radiator cap isn't venting. New radiator cap. And super glued the crack again. Think it'll hold. I don't know. What was wrong with your cap? Why was it not venting? Was it stuck or something? What was making it not open? Still 51:49. We've got one more minute. Or in fact, we're going to close out our poll. Blowers. Who wants blowers? Big boosty blowers. Chock full of boosty goodness. Yeah, Tom, I can give you a call. That's cool that you're putting a 2650 on there. The rubber part squished out and probably overlapped the hole or vented or jammed so it couldn't pop up. Oh, okay. What's the best name for a blower? I don't know. You get to that's if you get a blower, you get to name it whatever you want. Well, hello. What are you doing? Did you guys get whatever's out there? Was there a raccoon or something? Huh? Someone's eating the oranges out of the orange tree, and you guys are not even protecting the house. What if he decided to come in here? Huh? What are you doing? What are you doing? I'll be done in a minute. In fact, 1 minute. Positive it does it only under 40 degrees. I don't know. Oh, Sam, I don't know. If you're asking me which one to pick, I don't know. I don't know about your combination. Do have factory rockers on the GT40 heads, but you guys were talking LS. Yeah, but you could run. I mean, a roller rocker is a good idea on a small block Ford. In fact, I would argue that it's a better idea on a small block Ford than it is on an LS, because an LS, like I said, already has a roller fulcrum. It just doesn't have a roller tip. So the only thing you're gaining is the roller tip. And but with a small block Ford, you're gaining a roller fulcrum and a roller tip. Gen 3 Heavy 5.7 stroked or Cam 6.4. There's no bad choice there. Both of those are good. And on that note, Bruno said it's time to go. So we got to bounce. But I'll see you guys all tomorrow. There.